RC from the Mountaintop Joiner Shop here. One thing I thought I would never do when I started a YouTube channel for woodworking was to do a video about a cutting board. Yet that's exactly what I'm here to do today. Stick around to find out why. And hopefully, by the end of this video, you'll agree that was worth the effort. So before I get too far ahead of myself, I like to back up and kind of explain how I got to here and address the elephant in the room, which is this thing sitting here. This is this huge walnut sideboard commission I've been working on. Took a lot of work to get to here. These are all the hand-cut miter corner dovetails on here. The glue up was a big deal. And usually in this point in a project, I like to kind of step back for a moment and do a little, side project like over the weekend, something I can start and finish in a couple of days. I find that's a really good way to kind of recharge the batteries and feel like I'm actually getting something done in here. So what I ended up doing on this particular occasion is a cutting board. You see, we normally use plastic cutting boards in our kitchen, and recently a study came out saying that when you chop on these plastic cutting boards, you release microplastics into your food, which of course you then ingest, and then you have microplastics in your body, which I don't imagine is a good thing. So while this research isn't really that much of a revelation, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. I thought, hey, I got pieces of scrap all over my shop that I'm probably not going to use for anything else. I may as well make some wooden cutting boards out of them. So that's what I ended up doing here. And so I've started this cutting board. In fact, I'm almost finished with it. And it occurred to me while I was making it that you don't have to make a cutting board that complicated. It could literally just be a rectangle of, wood. But that, to my mind, is lost opportunity. You see, if you're an aspiring designer of furniture, there's a lot of kind of design muscles that can be exercised, even in something as simple as a cutting board. I've done a lot of things to this cutting board to make it prettier to look at and make it more aesthetically pleasing to use. And so I thought I would kind of sit down for a moment and kind of talk about what those principles are that I applied to this design out loud. And hopefully hearing all that will help you in your shop kind of wrap your head around how to add some aesthetic appeal to anything that you're working on, whether it's a cutting board or a big old sideboard like this one. So let's sit down for a moment and talk about just how much thought you can actually put into something as simple as a cutting board. Okay, so this is what I have so far, and this is a piece of birch that I had in my shop for I don't know how long. It's the only piece of birch I had, and the only reason I didn't throw it out was because it was a nice piece of birch. I had no intention of using it for any upcoming projects, so I used it for a cutting board. So it was kind of a long, narrow board, so I milled it flat. I cut it exactly in half, and then I kind of slip matched it, edge jointed it, put some dowels in there for alignment, and glued it up as a panel. And the end result was something that was just slightly rectangular. It was almost square, which is really boring. So I thought, how can I dress this up a little bit? And one thing I noticed is that the cathedral grain on the board, particularly on one side, was skewed at a little bit of an angle. So I thought, maybe that's something I can work with. So I took a square like this, and I put it right down the middle of that cathedral there, and just laid it down. And then I mirrored that angle with, just a straight edge here. I just kind of drew a line all the way across and cut it at that angle off at the end there. Then I took my sliding bevel, this guy here, took that angle off of this corner and mirrored that on the opposite corner, and then cut off that little wedge off of that end too. And what I ended up with is this kind of parallelogram shape. The whole thing is kind of skewed out of square now, and then kind of a rhomboid parallelogram shape. So that got me started, but that still isn't super exciting. So what I wanted to do is put some bevels around the edges. And I figured if I put those bevels around kind of the more acute corners, those corners will get super pointy. Might even poke somebody a little bit or maybe get damaged if you bounce it off the countertop or something like that. So I decided to put these bevels on the more obtuse corners, which are the opposite corners of the board here. And rather than just kind of, eyeball it and say that looks good or half-ass it or willy-nilly it or whatever you want to call that, I wanted to kind of stick to my principles and work off of the proportions that are already, present here in the board. So what I ended up doing was taking a little straight edge and measuring how tall or how thick the cutting board is, which is about 21 mil. So the thickness of this cutting board is about 21 mil, which you probably can't see there very well or not. But what I ended up doing was taking the thickness of that board and making that the width of my chamfers here. So I kind of came in here and put a little tick mark at the corner at about 21. I did the same thing on this corner. And then I drew lines from this corner to that line on this side, and did the same thing from this corner to this side here. And then I just put this thing up in my leg vise and planed this down with a jack plane until I got to the halfway point of the thickness here. So everything is based off the proportions that are already present here on the board. And the way I found the center point was to take, it's still square when I did it. So I use this MT center gauge from Woodpeckers tools. And you see it's got a little hole right there. That allows me to kind of draw a line at exactly the midpoint of the thickness of the board. So that's what I did at this corner here. And I did the same thing on the opposite corner to get those bevels. And of course, I did the same thing on the opposite side of the board. A lot of people with cutting boards, they'll put little rubber feet on one side of it, but to my mind, that's kind of wasting half of the potential of the cutting board, half of the useful life of the cutting board. So I like to have my cutting board to kind of be two-sided. When it comes to putting it down on the countertop, I use just some basic shelf liner underneath the cutting board. So I just kind of cut it to shape and just stick that underneath there. And then of course I can always just flip it over if I want to use the other side, if one side gets worn out or whatever. So the next thing I did was drill a hole in one side because, this has kind of a cool shape to it now, but there still wasn't enough there. And I also wanted something that could maybe stick a finger in and maybe facilitate picking it up off of the countertop a little bit better. And the way that I determined the diameter of this hole is basically just to measure my finger. So this is just a little bit bigger than the size of my finger. I think this was maybe a 7/8 inch Forstner bit that I put through here. And then one thing you also see a lot of people do when they drill a hole in the cutting board is just put a little kind of round over around the inside edge of it. Everybody does that. So that is another thing to me that was like, it's not very exciting. Let's do something different here. So what I thought I would do, and you can kind of see some of these layout lines on here already, I took my bevel and put some parallel lines coming out from the corner on both sides. Oh, and as far as the location of this hole, I just tried to kind of get it equidistant from each edge here. So the same distance here is here, or close to it. And then I kind of produced this parallelogram at the exact same angles as the overall size of the cutting board around this hole. And what I want to do is kind of do a relief carving, a kind of a depression into this box here. It's kind of like an upside down, kind of inverted, kind of pyramidal shape here, but which of course doesn't come to a point. We'll meet up to the hole I've already drilled here. And that brings me to another point about not only design in little small projects like this, but also taking the opportunity to try out something new, maybe stretch your skill set a little bit. I am not, a relief carver by any means. I've hardly done any of that. And this is something that can really only be done by chiseling it out. So I'm going to give that the old college try, you know what? And if it doesn't work out, it's just a cutting board, dude. So I don't think my wife will care if it's not perfectly carved out here. So let's give it a shot and see if I can't increase my chisel wielding skills. So let's take this over to the bench and start cutting this out and see where we end up. Okay, let's give this a shot and see how we do. So, like I said before, I'm not a relief carver of any sort, but I have heard that it's helpful to use a sharp chisel when you do this. So I went and sharpened this chisel, just kind of touched up the blade, especially since I'm going to be doing this in birch. I think it makes sense. And my game plan here is to work off of these lines in the middle here that kind of create this little plus sign. And because of where I'm sitting, I'm going to work towards these two lines in particular. So I'm going to establish these, because these are going to be at the bottom of these kind of pyramidal chamfers I'm doing here. I don't really know what to call them even. I'm going to focus on those. And I picked a chisel that's a little bit wider than these lines are long. I want these lines to taper off to nothing at the corners, so I'm kind of angling away from that corner a little bit. And just give that a little tap. I'll do the same thing here. Right on that pencil line, just like that. Then I'll start paring away material towards those lines. Just like that. And no doubt there will be experienced carvers watching what I'm doing and thinking to themselves, no, don't do that. You're messing it up. They're saying, RC, you're doing it wrong. But let's just give it a shot, see how we do. And establish a little bit deeper. This is already a little bit deep there, I think. So I may have already kind of made a faux pas, or whatever they call it. So far that side looks a little bit better than this side. And I'm kind of making a skew cut across the grain to meet that spot there. Give it a little tap, tappy tap. Well, it's starting to look like something already. I don't really know how deep I want to make this yet. I haven't really decided. I just go until I'm kind of satisfied with how it looks. I might want to rotate pretty soon here. I'm a little deeper on this side than this side. All right, got that started. What I think I want to do now is work into these sides here. So I'll just keep rotating and doing that. In hindsight, what would have made more sense is to, like, let's say for instance, this chisel cut that I've already made here is to pair them from this side and this side and then this side and then this side and kind of work your way down that way rather than create a vertical wall like this. Because now I have to pare away that vertical wall from the other side without anything to back it up. So I think that was the best approach already, but I'm already committed, so it is what it is. So I think I'm going to turn this so I can plane in from both sides to this cut here. So not only is this awkward to begin with because I'm not practiced at it, it's also awkward because I'm doing it while trying to not get in the way of a camera. So this is pretty exciting. I'm getting pretty close to where I want to be, depth-wise, I think. What if I try to follow the lines this way? What'll happen? Doesn't seem as smooth of a cut coming in this way. I'm kind of moving across the grain when I do it. Well, I keep having at it like this until I've gotten each of these points, these depressions here, to full depth, kind of equal depth all the way around. And then I'm going to try to remove the fields in between to try to make that a nice level surface on each side of this kind of parallelogram shape here. All right, so I've gotten these points here to get about as deep as I want to get them. So now I'm removing material in between them to try to flatten out those spaces to create those facets. So just kind of coming in here and paring away material like you've often seen done in carving. A little I've seen. You kind of pare away in one direction, and if it leaves a smooth cut, you're doing it right. If it's trying to lift out, tear out, whatever you want to call it, then you want to change your approach and come in from a different angle. So far it's going okay, so it seems. It does seem a little fraught with peril. How about that? I feel like I'm getting somewhere here. That's not too bad. Could be a cleaner surface. You know, I'm probably going to come in here with sandpaper actually and try to smooth everything out a little bit. It's not to say I can't tolerate chisel marks to an extent. I do want a somewhat smooth surface there when all is said and done. I like coming in from that angle. So I think I'm going to rotate the board and try to maintain that. Same kind of pushing angle as I go around, which, you know, the wood may or may not allow, but I'll give that a shot. A little bit of a hump right here. Just kind of feel it with my finger. That feels pretty good. All right, going to rotate and repeat. When it kind of blows through there, it's going to tag the opposite side a little bit. So I have to kind of keep going around and cleaning up those little corners a little bit as I go, unfortunately, but I think if I was much more practiced, I would do a little bit less of that, a little more chisel control, but it is what it is. You don't develop those skills without practicing them, so that's what I'm doing here, is practicing them. Well, this is a little bit painstaking. It's taken some time. Yeah, I'm certainly not going to rush it, but I am slowly achieving the results that I intended. Kind of what I was seeing in my head is coming to be, and as I keep going here. So all right, we're on to the other side now. Hopefully this side goes a little bit quicker and a little bit smoother. Let's see how we do. Let's see how it wants to tear out. Not going in that direction. Move my sitting stool out of the way and come from the other side. Much better. Going left-handed over here. Imagine, especially in carving, it's good to be at least somewhat ambidextrous with your chisels. All right, I think that's about as far as I can take it with the chiseling. It's a pretty smooth surface already, and it's okay if there's a few chisel marks showing in this. I don't want to necessarily hide the fact that this was done by hand, because I certainly had to put a lot of effort into doing it by hand, so why hide it? But that said, I do like to even things out a little bit, so I wrapped some 320 sandpaper around a little piece of sapele trim here. And I tried to wrap the sandpaper nice and tight around here so I have a nice kind of sharp edge that I can work into these corners with. And so I'm just going to come in here and try to match the angle of what I've already chiseled and sanding it out of there a little bit. And see if I can't even things out just a little bit. Not bad. So I keep doing that around each of these facets. And then I'm going to go ahead and sand my end grain here, which is going to need quite a bit of work. It almost feels like I raised the grain from hand planing, if that makes any sense, because I was doing skew cuts kind of across the end grain. It feels a little rough on the end here. So got a lot of sanding to do on this end grain in particular, but the whole board, and then we'll go ahead and oil it up. So just going to keep working on these corners, smoothing out these facets. And then I'll wrap a piece of sandpaper around my finger too, and just kind of chamfer these sharp edges around the outside of the hole there as well. Just kind of soften that up a little bit. Not trying to round it over so much, just kind of break the edges. Okay, we're finally to the fun part. I got everything all sanded. It's ready to go. So this is what I like to use for cutting boards. It's this Boost Block stuff. This is their mystery oil. So this is kind of like a penetrating oil. It's probably a mixture of mineral oil and I don't know what. And that soaks into the wood pretty good. And then once that's kind of soaked in and somewhat dry, you can go back over that with the Boost Block board cream. And this, of course, you can tell by looking at it, has a lot more wax in it to kind of keep all that oil that you just put on there kind of sealed in a little bit better. So this is kind of the go-to for me, are these two items. And if I can find it, I'll leave an affiliate link in the description for this stuff too, because there might be a chance that some of you are making cutting boards for holiday gifts, and this is a good thing to kind of gift along with it, some means of kind of maintaining your cutting boards in a nice, clean, antimicrobial state. So I'm going to don some gloves and wipe the stuff on, and we'll see how it looks. There you have it. Got some oil on there. Wipe the excess off, but there's still some on the surface there that needs to soak in. But yeah, gives that birch a nice golden tone to it. You can see some chatoyance kind of popping out. And of course, eventually this is going to get ruined by chopping on it, but whatever. And you can see I got the little hole there with a little kind of pyramidal depression surrounding it. This little hand cut little accent to it there. In the end, I think it turned out quite nice, and I think it was worth the effort to make not just a rectangular piece of wood, but something that is aesthetically pleasing to look at and use. All right, so that's it. My little side project for the weekend is done, and I like how it turned out. And if there's anything I want to impress upon you in the making of this video, it's not necessarily that you should do little side projects like this. But if you do, you should see those as opportunities to get your creative juices flowing and to practice some good design principles. You saw how I described in this video how I made use of principles like proportion and positioning and things like that when I put this together. And then the end result is something that I can be happy with and be proud of, even though it's just a simple cutting board. So if you go to your shop and you're making something basic like a cutting board, make it pretty. If you're making a birdhouse, give it some pizzazz. If you're making a little keepsake box, give it a little extra something. And in the course of doing that, you'll further your design sense and, of course, your hand tool skills as well, probably. And those skills will always translate into doing larger projects like this big sideboard here, or this tool cabinet or whatever. So I hope you got something out of this video. And if you want to learn more about design, I did a whole series on it back when my channel was still kind of new. And even though the video, or the production quality wasn't quite there yet, the information is very much still good. So if you go into my channel and you want to learn more about actually designing your own furniture, I would go and take a look at those. And of course, as always, I'm going to include some affiliate links for some of the products I used in this video. So if you use those affiliate links to purchase those products or anything else, a small portion of your purchase goes towards supporting this channel at no extra cost to you. So I always appreciate it when you do that. So I appreciate you watching and indulging me while I did something a little different on my channel, and we'll catch you next time. Now, if you like what you saw here, please hit like and subscribe. It would help me out a lot. Also hit the little bell icon if you want to be notified anytime I release a new video. And if you didn't like what you saw here, keep it to yourself, pal. Or watch one of my other videos. You might like one of those. Thank you for watching.